Well, hello, good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's brief presentation on Ideate BIMLink, Beyond Traditional Data Editing Task. Today, we're going to focus on creating new elements and types. So my name is Sash Kazamanijad. I am the Customer Success Manager with Ideate Software. I'm located in Portland, Oregon. My background's in architecture, California licensed architect, and been with Ideate now for over 7 years. The reason why we're here today is we are here to help you simplify your Revit data challenges. So again, all of our tools are really focused on data editing and data management. We are here really to ensure that you are successful with your daily data challenges within Revit. Okay, real quickly, just a couple things. We do have really great support and great help. So if you do need any help with any of our products, be sure to check out our website and also the in-product help. So whatever product you're working in, we have the in-product help, and some of that will also take you to our website. Be sure to check that out. We have a lot of great information. And if you're running into a wall or you need some additional help, we always have our support side of things. So both Richard and myself and our Director of Software Development, we always look at the queue to answer questions and review them. So if you do need some technical support, please don't be shy. Reach out to us. If you're not aware, we do support and update all of our software, basically from the current version of Revit plus the 3 prior versions. We follow the Autodesk development cycle in this case. So currently it's the Revit 2021 version all the way back through 2018. However, if you do need access to earlier versions of Revit, you can certainly access that software. And today I'm going to show you that we do have a lot of substantial content for helping you get started with one of our products. So if you're in BIMLink and you need a starting point, definitely be sure to have a look at that sample content. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get started here. All right, so if you've attended the few other webinars we've had that were surrounding or based on the whole beyond data editing, we had looked at some ways that you could do some health checks and some QA, QC, and so forth. And for today's webcast, we're going to focus on creating some new elements, okay? And so that's really what our goal is for today. I just want to remind you that in BIMLink, however, we do try to break up our links or our sample content based on discipline or workflows. And you can see them highlighted here on your screen. So I always try to encourage people, when you can, be sure to start off with one of our pre-configured definitions. It's a great starting point, and if you need to make changes to those links, you can add or remove parameter data as you see fit. And this is very much like editing a schedule in your projects. You're basically building a schedule or tabulation of data and adding, removing parameter, from that standpoint. And again, I just want to remind you that BIMLink is a great product, not only for data editing, but also for QA, QC related tasks, overall model health checks, and even for today, being the ability to create new types and even place some elements. So today's focus, creating new elements. So I always like to remind people that BIMLink is a great product for more than just the general data review and data editing. So again, we do the health checks, we do the QA, QC type work. We also have a great revision tools. And if you haven't looked at some of the revision tools that we've built into BIMLink and the access to the revision data, have a look at that. And we have some great resources on our website that can also give you some information on how that process works. We also have some specialized Excel templates that can actually help you take that revision data out to Excel, where it can actually formulate it in a kind of revision schedule. So it gives you a sheet list and then also lists all the revisions that exist on those sheets. So those are the kinds of things that we like to do with BIMLink. So taking this data out and then using like macros or pivot tables to kind of restructure that data so that you can bring it back into your model if you need to. But also creating new types and instances. And I think this is kind of one of those areas that may be underutilized by some folks. And that's why we wanted to put on this webcast today to show you some of the ways in which you can use BIMLink for these tasks. So a couple things when you're doing this task, we have a create elements folder within BIMLink, and in that folder, we've actually created several links to help you get started. These are those pre-configured definitions that I've been talking about. By the way, this list isn't the exhaustive list and all that BIMLink can do. We're just trying to provide you some of that content to help you get started. So as I mentioned earlier, start with one of these links if you can. Now, I want to point out to you that when you do look at some of these links, despite how they're named, you really want to pay attention to whether they are instance-based or type-based, okay? So in the instance-based links, what we're basically doing is, in a sense, we're creating or placing these types of elements. So a great example is, how do you create a bunch of sheets? Whether they're going to be sheets that are going to show up, in your sheet list in your project browser, or whether they're going to be some sort of placeholder sheets. That would be kind of an instance-based workflow. Also, for those of you that, let's say, are doing a lot of room programming, BIMLink is a great product to help you with this. So you can take Excel and generate basically a program of your rooms, room name, room number, maybe the room function, some of the occupancy type information and so forth. And you can kind of pre-configure that information in Excel. And then you can use BIMLink to pull that data back into your model and generate unplaced rooms. And as you start placing those rooms, all of that data is ready to go. It's all done for you. So if you're placing rooms one by one and then going in and filling in all the information through a schedule or through a floor plan view, BIMLink can save you a ton of time with this. Also, for those of you that are, let's say, on the MEP side of things, and you are generating spaces, but you need to generate spaces from, let's say, an architect's model that's linked into your project where they've done all the room creation and set up the room name and room numbers. We actually have a workflow in BIMLink that actually helps you create spaces from linked rooms. It's pretty slick, and we have some videos and information on our website to help you with this process. Also, custom families, we can help you out with that information. Area, schedule keys as well, and as I mentioned before, revisions. So again, this will kind of help you place the instances or create instances of those elements. The other ones are type-based, okay? And so in this case here, we're talking about creating many new types. So view types is a good example, furniture types, mechanical equipment, structural, and so forth. And the nice thing about the the creating of types is we're pretty limitless on the types that we can create. Instances, we do have some limitations in terms of the categories or the types of elements in which we can create and place instances. And some of the reasons why there are is because some of the elements that you go to place in your models may require a face-based, right? So you have some families that are face-based, or some that are hosted by levels or hosted by floors. And so some of that information can be a little tricky to manage, in any sort of outside product, right? Like BIMLink. And so in terms of the instance placement, some of that can be a little bit more challenging. And by the way, at the end of this webcast where we do have a survey, if you do want to have the ability to use Excel and BIMLink to place elements, in your project, please let us know what you want to do, and we'll definitely have a look at that and log that information. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and get right into this and just give you a demo on how we can use BIMLink to create some sheet instances. And I'm going to show you two workflows. I'm going to show you how to create sheets and assign a title block, but also how you can create placeholder sheets. So for example, if you're, let's say, on the architecture side and you have a list of sheets from the consultants and you want to generate that sheet index, but not actually have those show up in your browser, how do we do that? I'm going to show you how you could do that with BIMLink. Also, just for the mechanical side of things, I'm going to show you how to create air terminal types. And again, we're just using air terminals as an example, but it's the idea of how do we create types. So again, if you're on the architecture side, you want to create furniture types or wall types, the process is essentially the same. I'm just going to show you just on kind of the mechanical side how they could create air terminal types. And then the idea of creating and placing elements, which again, as I mentioned before, is an instance-based workflow. How do we actually use BIMLink to specify some coordinate data so we can place these plantings in a real specific location? So I'm going to go ahead and just switch over to Revit, and I'm going to start off with just a architectural model over here, and we're going to show you how to create these sheets. So you can see in my project browser, I have a pretty limited amount of sheets showing up over here. And what I'd like to do is use BIMLink to assist me with this process. And so what I'm going to do here is go to BIMLink. And you can see as BIMLink launches here, I just have one here for levels. And I'll just clear this out just to keep things kind of clean. And what I'm going to do here is come to New. And when I go to New, as I recommended before, always check to see if we have any sort of sample links that are ready to go. We may be able to help you with this process. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to look at the create elements. And in this folder right here, as I showed you earlier, this is our listing of pre-configured links that can help you get started. And if you don't see what you need, you can always create one from scratch. But let's look at create elements over here. And what I want to look for is the create placeholder sheet. So what I'm going to do here is just even type in sheets. And right here, we could see 02 create new. And this one here, it gives you some information. If you have placeholder sheets, it says leave the title block field empty, otherwise specify a loaded title block. And you'll notice over here that it's instance based. So I'll go ahead and click on next. And by default, what we do here is we filter out all of your existing sheets, especially on large projects. If you have tons of these sheets, you may want to filter this out. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the filters tab, and it says where sheet number does not have a value set, meaning if you do have a value set for a sheet number, filter those sheets out. I'll go ahead and remove that just so we can show you the 35 sheets that we have in our project. So, there they are. Okay. The other thing that I want to point out that's important, or maybe not important, it just depends on how you look at things, is this option right here called export with drop-down values. And I'm going to explain to you what this means in just a moment. Okay, so the goal here is to create some new sheets with title blocks assigned and placeholder sheets as well. If you need to add other bits of information, created by or drawn by or reviewed by or any of those types of parameters or any sort of custom sheet parameters, you can absolutely add that information now and take that out to Excel using BIMLink. For now, I'm just going to use this kind of default setting over here because the goal here is just to create and just show you the process for generating these sheets. I'll go ahead and hit done, and then I'm going to export this information out. Now, what I want to point out to you is I already have a Excel file here that has my consultant sheet information in here, okay? And I'm going to use this file and actually place this link inside of there so I can maybe grab some of that consultant information and generate those sheets. You can always create its own file and do the edits from there, but I want to actually place this inside of here. Now, one thing I want to reiterate, BIMLink is smart in that when I select this Excel file, it's not going to overwrite this entire file. If it did, it would just wipe out all the data that's inside of there. Instead, when I hit the save button, it says, hey, there's already some information in here. What do you want to do? And I actually want to insert a new worksheet inside of that file. I absolutely love this. This is so important so that you don't destroy any of your other existing data inside of that file. All right, so now that I have this open, you can see I have some of the consultant information over here, but then I have the information that I dumped out. Now, what I want to point out to you is you saw earlier, there was that option to export with dropdown. And basically what that means is it generated a list of my title blocks that I have in my project. That's what this dropdown list is. And if you've ever seen this, we put a little space here, and then we kind of show you the dropdown list. This is the information that BIMLink is going to read upon import. This is just information that I can use. And you can see over here, for example, I have a sheet that doesn't have a title block assigned to it, and it generates that drop-down list. What I'm going to do, just for simplicity's sakes, is I'm just going to come in here. I'm going to insert a few rows. So I'll just go ahead and just insert maybe 3 rows of information here. And you can see what it does. And then I'm just going to keep this really simple. I'm just going to copy this to the clipboard and just paste these values here. And all I'm going to do just for this example here is I'm just going to select these and just do a Control F or a find. All right. And then what I'm going to basically do here is I'm going to replace the 102 with 103. Okay. And you can see over here that I'm basically replacing these sheet numbers that I had copied over with some new sheets. And then same thing over here, I'm just going to replace this with from level 2 to level 3. So all I'm basically doing is just creating some new sheet names, right? So I'm going to say level 2 to level 3, okay? And I'll replace all. So basically, these are going to be the 3 sheets that I create. Now over here, what I want to do is in this column over here, I want to type in the word new, and that's going to tell BIMLink to create the new sheets. Now for the title blocks, because of where I inserted this information, I don't get a drop-down list. So if I want to use the same exact, title block for these 3 sheets, I could simply fill it down, right? Or if I really wanted to, since I have a field here that has a drop-down, I can copy this over here if I wanted to and paste it, and then basically I get a drop-down list. It's really up to you on how you want to approach this. it doesn't really matter, okay? And there are ways, and we go through this on our website on how you can actually generate these drop-down lists if you really needed to. But the idea here is that we're going to put new in here and specify a title block, a sheet number, sheet name, and appears in the sheet list. Now, what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to take the structural sheet list, and I'm just going to copy this info from my consultant. So let me just copy this to the clipboard. And then what I'm going to do over here is in this area right here, I'm going to go ahead and just paste the values. So there's the structural sheet information. And what I can do is also fill down if I want this to appear in my sheet list, right? Maybe, I have a sheet index that's going to show this on a cover sheet. The key thing right here is to put the word new once again. And when I do that, that's going to tell BIMLink to create the new sheets. So let's go ahead and fill that down. Now, if you remember earlier, when I showed you that link, it said if you want to create placeholder sheets, leave the title block field blank. That's what I want to do with the structural sheets. But up here, I want to actually create those sheets. So I'm going to leave these with the sheet name as new, but leave these as placeholders. I'm going to go ahead and save this and close it. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to import. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and pick that hospital file. And then it's going to automatically recognize the one tab in there that I had exported out. So it's not going to ask me to pick a particular tab. But you can see over here that I generated element ID number. I have the title block information, the new sheet name. And then if I scroll down, these are all the placeholder sheets. So keep an eye out over here when I hit import. Okay, so just like that, I generated these new sheets. So here's the A103, it specified the title block. And then finally, if I right click and go to new sheet, here are all the placeholder sheets that were generated. So there's one way in which I could use BIMLink to create hundreds of sheets, all named, all numbered, with all the information pre-populated, ready to go, and I can save myself tons of time. So that's one example of using BIMLink to create the sheets. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch over to a mechanical file. And what I'm going to show you now is how I can create some new air terminal types. And even though I'm showing you air terminal types, this process that I'm about to show you here can really apply to pretty much most categories in Revit. So I want to just kind of distribute the information and kind of cover other disciplines as well. So we're going to use a mechanical example over here. So I'm going to come to BIMLink, and then this time I'm going to go to New. And when I go to new over here, the first thing I could do is I could type in, air to look for air terminals. And when I come over here, I see we have a pre-configured link that is instance-based. And, we have one over here for spaces. So I don't have a air terminal types. Now, I could do a couple of things here. I could start with this link over here and then convert it to a type-based link. And the way that's basically done is I select it over here. I can hit done, and then you can actually right-click and say convert link. And what that does is it'll take that link and use those properties and make a type-based link out of it. If you didn't know that little trick, now you do, because this is an instance-based, and by converting the link, I made it type-based. But what I'm going to do here just for this exercise is I'm going to create a new one from scratch. And again, as I mentioned before, we always try to encourage people to create new or basically edit information by using one of our pre-configured links. And when in doubt, you can always create your own. So what I'm going to do here is go to by category, and I'm going to pick on air terminals. And again, as I mentioned before, since I don't have maybe a link that I want to use here, I want to create a custom one from scratch. And then here's where I want to pick type. Okay, so this is going to allow me to create some new types using this. So I'm going to go to next, and you can see here there's only 7 air terminal types in this particular project. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and add some parameters over here. So for example, I'm going to come over and look at type, and here's my type name. So I'll go ahead and actually let's start with family name. So let's do family name. Okay, so I'll add family name. I'm going to add type name. Okay, so there's my type name right there. And then I think what I'm also going to do here is just clear this. I'm going to look for diffuser width. Okay, so because I want to create some new diffusers and specify the width. And then I also think I'm going to go ahead and specify a manufacturer. If maybe this is not, maybe this is going to be a proprietary project here, so I want to specify that. And I'm going to show you an interesting one here. I'm going to show you the default elevation. And notice there's 2 parameters over here. Looks like somebody at one point had loaded up a family with their own custom default parameter. So I'm just going to bring them both up and then use the appropriate one for that particular type. And then finally, what I'm going to do here is under my sorting, I'll just sort by my family name. All right, we'll go from A to Z. All right, now that I have this kind of built out the way I want to, I'm going to hit done. And then I'm going to export this information out. And I'm going to just export it to this folder. And I'm not going to slip it into an existing Excel file. It's just going to be its own standalone. So I'll go ahead and hit save. And we'll open the file. Okay, so here are my 7 types. And if I just come back to Revit real quick, just to show you what I'm talking about, I'm just talking about these 7 types that you see right here, right? These families and these types. These are the 7 families. And then you can see this one here has one particular type. And we want to create some additional types for this one family. That's the goal here. So I'm going to come back to that Excel file. And I think the one that I'm going to pick is this exhaust diffuser hosted. So like I did earlier with the sheets, I think I'm just going to go ahead and insert a few rows. We'll just kind of keep this really simple. All right, and the first thing we have to do is we need to type in the word new. If you don't, BIMLink is not going to understand what to do. So we'll go ahead and fill that down. And by the way, for those of you that use BIMLink a lot, you know that white fields mean they're editable and gray means that they're not. In the case here where I fill this down or I just inserted these new rows, these were gray. If this bothers you, there's no harm in changing the fill color to white, although it's not going to make any difference. BIMLink is going to understand what to do here. So if it's just a graphical thing for you in this instance, feel free to change it to white. Now, changing this to a white fill doesn't mean it's going to become editable. Just something to kind of keep in mind. Now, because I want to create 3 new types, for this family, I'm going to just fill down this family name. We're going to instruct it to create the new types for this family over here. So we want to make sure that that matches. And then just to cheat things a little bit, I'm going to fill this down just to get the basic name of the type. But what I'm going to do here real quickly is I'm just going to just make this a 14 by 14. And then I'll come over here and make a 16 by 16, right? So maybe you're working with a mechanical engineer and they're coming back and saying, hey, you need these new diffusers here. Well, this is a great opportunity to do that. And if you had other information for that diffuser, CFM and all that you wanted to fill out, this is a great time to do that. Okay, but I didn't add those parameters in this instance either. So now what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to type in 14 inches, 16 inches, and 18 inches. And then we'll go ahead and just make the manufacturer the same for those. And then we're going to set the default elevation for these 3 types at 4 feet. Okay. And actually, why not? Let's just make this one 6 feet just to see what happens. All right. I've basically generated those new types. And as I mentioned before, this works for a lot of categories in Revit, not just air terminals. So again, if you're on the architectural or structural side, if you want to generate structural columns or so forth, no problem. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. Keep an eye out over here. This is the exciting part. I'm going to come to import and I'm going to pick the air terminal types. All right, and just like that, we could see over here that it generated the element ID numbers, the new types, and the heights. And of course, we're just doing a unit conversion within BIMLink, but they will come at 14, 16, and 18 inches. And then take a look at the default elevation. All right, look what happens when I go to import. You'll see right over here that these have been generated. And again, if I select this one over here, you can see the diffuser width and the default elevation and the manufacturer. And if I click on this 18-inch, you can see over here the default elevation was set to 6 feet as well. So great opportunity to generate a long list of types using BIMLink and Excel. Otherwise, you have to right-click in here and say, new type or edit type and duplicate and fill in all that information. Let's do it wholesale using BIMLink. Okay, and the last workflow that I'm going to show you, and then we'll take some questions and from the audience here. But I wanted to show you an example of now taking some instances that I already have, or some types, that I already have in my project, and placing some instances, in my model. Now, as I mentioned before, I just want to clarify this. When you are placing instances, we do have, limitations on the types of elements that can be placed as instances. And I mentioned before, because Revit has a variety of way of doing things, whether they're hosted or not, or they're based on some sort of level or no level. Again, if you have particulars that you want to know more about or would like to see integrated into BIMLink, let us know in the survey. Okay, plantings is one example of a category that we do allow to be placed. Furniture is another example in which we allow people to place those types of elements. We've done some work in the code structure to help us with that process. So let's take a look at this one. I'm going to come over to BIMLink and I'm going to go to new. And I'm going to come back to browse, and we'll go to the create elements. And in my create elements, I'm going to look for plantings. And here's that plantings create new. And instead of it being type-based, these are the instance-based. And this allows you to specify the XY coordinates of your plantings. So I'm going to go to next over here. And you can see I only have one tree showing up in here. And you can actually maybe see it down here. We'll have a little fun with this tree. This was the original tree on site. And we are going to design our project around this one tree, okay? All right, so the only thing I think I'm gonna just modify here is I don't really care that if whether it's in place or not, so I'm just gonna go ahead and remove that. It's really of no importance to me. But you'll notice over here, the coordinate X and coordinate Y are have a white fill, which means they're actually editable. I could actually use BIMLink to move this tree. Maybe dangerous, but you get the idea, right? But I'm gonna take this information and let's say my landscape designer gave me a species of plantings and the coordinate locations, and I want to just use BIMLink to just place those on my site. That's basically what we're going to do. Notice over here, there is a drop-down list. That means I have families loaded up. So if you do have species of information, as an example, or furniture, as an example, that you want to place using coordinates, you want to make sure that those families are loaded up in your project first before you use BIMLink to bring that information in. Otherwise, it's going to say, hey, that family doesn't exist, and will give you an error. Okay, so I have the families that I want loaded up to place. So let's look at this process. I'm going to hit done, and I'm going to export this information out. And kind of like the sheets, I already have some information from my landscape in terms of the species of plantings and their coordinates. So I'm going to place this link right here inside of this file. So I'll select it and insert a new worksheet. All right, and then I'm going to hit open file. Okay, so here's kind of the information from my landscape. Here's maybe they noted that this is an existing tree that's on site, and those coordinates match the coordinates of the ones that's currently my Revit model. But all of this information here is new. And when I come over here, you could see that I have the one tree and then my drop-down list. So here are my levels, and here's my plantings. And real quickly, if I come back to BIMLink and I come back to this information over here, this is the drop-down list for the levels, and that was a drop-down list for the families. And if I come over to the link tab, that's the reason why we got that list, is this export drop-down values. And again, the importance behind all of that is that allows me to basically come in here and have a list of plantings. And I can swap things out if I wanted to. If I wanted to swap this tree out with something different, I could do that. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to grab the this information over here. All right, so we'll just grab the coordinates X and Y, the phase that these plantings are going to be placed in. And then while I'm at it, let's just grab this list down below. I don't want to copy this one over here because it's already exists in my project. I'm just going to copy it to the clipboard. And then over here, I'm going to paste the values. All right, whoops. And I need to actually just do that a little differently. Let me come back over here. I want to grab the, I'll just do this. Let me just do this here. I'm going to delete this and come in and grab those. I know these are all going to be in the new construction phase. So let's just copy that. And now we can actually come over here and paste those values. All right, there we have it. So this is from our landscape and so forth. So now what I want to do is I want to come over here and type in new, and I'm going to fill this down. Okay, and then all of these will be hosted or referenced by the first floor level. Okay, so there you have it. And then just for the heck of it, I'm going to make this like 150 feet and 100 feet. I'm going to move this tree, which is kind of a no-no in real life, but I just want to show you that I can also change the coordinates. So here's our families and types. They're already loaded up. Here's the coordinate information. I'm good to go. So I'm going to hit save and close. We're just about done here. And then let me just real quickly close out of this and just show you where I want you to kind of focus. I want you to focus on this tree and kind of these areas over here. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to come to BIMLink. I'm going to import that information. I'm going to pick the plantings. All right, no errors and warnings. You could see that I changed the coordinates here, and I'm creating all these new elements. All right, keep an eye out over here as I hit import. And you could see now that based on the coordinate specifications and the information from landscape, I was able to place these plantings and kind of do a no-no over here, which is move this tree while I was at it. So real quickly to summarize before we take questions and close this out, for certain instances and placements, not all categories are available. Again, it has to do a lot with hosting. So you can see here that you can have a host level over here, or things are face-based. But if you do want to see some categories open up, please let us know in the survey. For type-based things, where you saw me create like new air terminal types, a lot of availability in each category for creating those new types. So Richard, before we close this out, do we have any questions from the audience?
Well, I think you answered most of the questions, but I just wanted to sort of piggyback on what you just said about types. We did have a question about creating casework types, and the process would be exactly what you showed. We don't have a create new types for casework specifically, but you could, as you're doing, you could create the type link and you can go and do exactly what you did for the air terminals. Another question that came up that I thought would be good, that I did answer for the entire group, but just there was a question about the sheets and the placeholder sheets and would they appear in the sheet list. And I said there's a property that you can assign that says the property is appears in sheet list. And so if it's true, obviously, then it would appear. And if it's set to false, it would not appear. So there was just a question if you could, you're exactly right there, appears in sheet list, true or false. So that can control both the sheet as well as the placeholder sheet, or the actual sheet and the placeholder sheet, whether it would appear in the sheet list or not. So
awesome.
I think, and actually there's a good question that just came through. Can you create groups with BIMLink? That is a good question, but it is not something, I don't think we can do group types.
No, I don't believe you can do that. And then you'd have to somehow specify what is part of that group. One thing I need to double check is whether we can place group instances. That would be, one thing. Again, if we come over here, and I always just tell people, if you're not sure, what can we get here, right? So we can do model groups. So my guess is over here, if we go to the instance-based for model groups and have a look, let's just see if there is coordinate data. So we can get coordinate data for pretty much anything, right? So if I come over here, so knowing that this is grayed out, my guess is we probably cannot actually place these groups. So again, if that's something that you really absolutely need, let us know in the survey and we'll take a look at that. But actually creating groups, that's a little bit of a different workflow.
Yeah.
Because again, how do you handle attached detail groups? What's going to be inside of that group? Those are all very tricky properties. And as you know, groups are always a little bit tricky just in general, because we're very limited from even an API perspective to be able to edit groups and get into that edit group mode and safely make changes before closing out. And so groups are always a fun one to deal with.
And then also real quickly, there's a question about, will the new placed plantings have IDs in the Excel file? And so I think the clarification there is when you first have them in the Excel file, there is no Revit element ID. But then when Sash imported them in from the Excel file and said new, well, then Revit creates that new element, right, at the required location or the specified location. And then at that point, it assigns a Revit element ID. So if you were to round trip that again and export it back, of course, it would have a Revit element ID, if that's the question.
Yeah, so I just undid my import of BIMLink to generate those plantings. And you can see right here in yellow that an element ID now appears. So it generated an element ID for all of those plantings upon import. Now, if I were to take this, so let me import it again. If I were to now export this out and do this and overwrite that tab that was inside of there, you're now going to see the current plantings with element IDs assigned to them. So once we import it, when you hit that new and you import, Revit will generate an element ID for those elements. Great question.
Yeah, and then there's one also about we create circuits and power electrical fixtures. Again, think about this as, the elements have to exist within Revit. So like when Sash created the plantings had to exist within the file, like it's just not creating them from scratch. So I guess when you're looking at circuits, that's sort of a unique item because you're sort of connecting items together. So I'd have to check on, what does that mean to actually create those. Electrical fixtures, absolutely, we could create new electrical fixture types
Mhm.
using Ideate BIMLink.
Absolutely. So yeah, if you have any new types, let's say you already have loaded up some single pole switches, but you need a single pole, switch that has a dimmer option or a three-way switch, but you want it to be part of that one family. You can absolutely create the new types and then add other parameter data that needs to be edited as well. No problem doing that. Now, placing those, that is a little bit of a different situation. We need to look into whether we can place those switches because you have to specify coordinates. And as you know, some of the ideas or some of the workflows for placing switches, where a lot of those are actually face-based, that's a little bit of a different situation, right? So if that's a big need for you, let us know. We'll take a look at that. We log all this information and look at it.
Yeah, that is an additional question about placing electrical fixtures. So,
Right, exactly. I bet there's some tricks behind it just because of the fact that they are face-based. Thank you once again for your time. Really appreciate it. Richard, thank you for all of your help. We hope this was an informative webinar for you. And if you have any questions, please let us know through the survey. And of course, you can find us online at ideatesoftware.com. We'll hang out here for another minute. And thank you once again. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you next time.